Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3.
Welcome to Politics.
Folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Williams, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. We are filled up, let me tell you that. And for those of you who come and stay for 5 minutes and 10 minutes and 15 minutes or whatever, this is a full show. And if you have the wherewithal, if you have the ability to do so, we are going to want you to be here for the entire hour. Why is that? Because above and beyond, well, I tell you what. Let me go ahead and get the show started, and you will see why. You will see why it is of utmost importance. The title of the show today is 17-year-old climate activist Arjun Marwaha activating Americans with his new book. This and the subtitle, this 17-year-old climate activist Arjun Marwaha will make a difference both with his new book and his activism. But Time editor at large, Anand Giridharadas stunts MSNBC billionaire apologist on fall philanthropy. That's the subtitle. Anyhow, Arjun Marwaha discusses climate change in the first segment of the program. He wrote the book, Our Changing Earth, Why Climate Change Matters to Young People. That is easy for all to understand, independent. And this is an important thing. This book, I read the book, it was written independent of political ideology. It's fact-based, but not only that, it's easy to read, and it brings it home. 17-year-old kid wrote this book. I think he wrote it while he was 16 years old. He brings it home not only for young people, like I was telling him in the interview. This book is not just for a whole bunch of young people. This book is for just about everybody. But I tell you better than that, my friends. After we do that interview, which is not a long interview, it's a fairly short interview, or 20 minutes or so, somewhere around there. After we do that interview, I'm going to play you a 3-minute video of I can never say his name right, Anand Giridharadas, the interchange he had with Stephanie Rule, and I mean it was perfect. Essentially, he pretty much said something similar to he had the reaction to Bloomberg, similar to the reaction that I had when Smith gave a few hundred students at Morehouse College free reign, free education for those people, the chosen. But he was so articulate in the way he put it, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how that, how that really impact billionaires, capitalism, etc. But lastly, we're going to talk about the AMA, the American Medical Association, the National Health Program, that group, Health Physicians of America. They are protesting against the AMA, another group of elitist doctors that are in the way, and they're saying, "Get to hell out of the way." So we have quite a bit to talk about. So I want you to stick around. I want you to stay because, folks, this is going to be good. I'm also going to want you to give me a call and tell me what you think. What's the thought process that you're having based on what we're saying? This is important. This is some essential stuff. But I tell you what, let's go ahead and get started with the interview, and then we're going to, after the interview, we're going to go into Anand Giridharadas, the statement that he made on Bloomberg, the billionaire. So let's go ahead and get that started. I'm here with Arjun Marwaha, and he is the author of a book called Our Changing Earth, Why Climate Change Matters to Young People. Arjun is a 17-year-old activist and author, and he is out spreading the word with the expectation that he and his cohort will have and make a difference in 2020. And after reading this book, I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Marwaha. You're going to make a difference. First of all, I'm going to be dead honest. What is a 17-year-old doing writing a book of this caliber?
Thank you. Yeah. It really all began with just my interest in climate change and the weather early on because I was always intrigued, like, how could there be such big storms out there? And it just didn't make sense to me all at the beginning. So I just kind of, kept on hearing about these stories, becoming more extreme in these types of weather events. And I started to piece together that climate change is, a huge threat. And like it threatens our whole world, our future, my future children, grandchildren, all of that stuff we've been hearing these past year because of this huge youth activism. And so I think just combining the youth activism with the lack of political inaction, that's kind of been a huge ground for why climate change is really important. So I think it's like they both work together, the political inaction plus the youth activism coming together.
Now, where are you located in the country?
So I'm in Southern California, Orange County. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you got the idea to, when did you get this idea? First of all, we're going to get deeply into the book in a little bit, but what made you decide to say, you know what, I want to put all these things that I've been thinking about on paper, on the internet, so that others can see?
Sure. So I felt that we were kind of missing some kind of dialogue between the young people. There was maybe some misinformation. They're hearing like scattered bits of statistics, like maybe on their social media accounts, but there was nothing really there, nothing concrete. The statistics were changing. There was no really like factual kind of basis. And so I just felt like a book would be the best way to combine all the different effects of climate change and the health effects into like one reliable location where they can kind of like look back to, and plus kind of understand in like a more basic kind of way, not like completely scientific, factual kind of, book or other kind of medium. So I think it's kind of a good balance for people to kind of look into print. And then also I was really interested in writing for many different years. And I've always loved writing and its ability to kind of communicate. So I think that is a huge, the creative aspect as well is something that's really fun to me too.
So what are you a junior in high school now, or?
I'm a rising senior, just finished junior year in high school.
Okay, excellent. All right, let's go ahead and go on to the book.
Sure.
First of all, I want you to explain to the audience what climate change is. Because a lot of people, those are buzzwords that are going around, and even the grown-ups, if you will, the old folk, if you will, don't quite understand what the hell it is. I heard the president confusing climate as with weather, which, so explain to folks what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So climate change, first of all, the climate, let's differentiate climate and weather. So weather is the day-to-day kind of events of the atmosphere around the Earth. Every single day you say, this is the weather today, that's the weather tomorrow. The climate is a lot more long-term. Okay, so we're going to be talking about how the climate is going to be getting hotter, as in like the entire trend. We have like a line graph of all the temperatures throughout the year. We shift it up a little bit. Climate has, become hotter throughout the world. That's kind of the general idea. We're looking at a long-term kind of change in the entire way we perceive weather and the entire way that the Earth's atmosphere is going to be, producing more heat. So it's those kind of things that are going to be a lot more prevalent. And including with climate change, of course, we know global warming is one of the main effects. We also have more wetter and more like floods kind of conditions because of the fact we have more water vapor in the atmosphere from the evaporation with more heat. So it's kind of like a positive feedback loop. We lead to more and more of the same effect if we have one effect. So it all kind of adds up. So that's kind of the general.
Yeah, that is an excellent differentiation between weather and climate. Now, in your book, you also made and you spent quite an inordinate amount of time to differentiate between, whenever we talk about greenhouse gases that are the one of the things, or rather carbon dioxide, as what's causing our climate to change to some extent, to heat up.
Right.
You actually differentiated between the gases as well. So why don't you tell us a little about what are all these things that are that affect climate as we know it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main kind of thing that affects climate is if you have the presence of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And what
They
that means,
are.
yeah. So when you have more of those greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we have so essentially all of our heat comes from the sun. I think that's important to understand. All we get all that solar energy, it hits our atmosphere, and then some of it Earth bounces back. Like we don't want it; that's too much heat for us. The rest it comes through, and that's what kind of fuels the Earth's energy system. Okay, so going from that, if we have more greenhouse gases, we essentially have more gases up there that will absorb the solar energy. They will be little exceptions in like little loopholes in the atmosphere where when the heat reaches them, they're just going to absorb it, and keep it in the atmosphere. Kind of. So if we have more of those, essentially we're going to be bringing in more and more heat into our atmosphere. And so the most prevalent greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide, all throughout the atmosphere. And so it has a smaller tendency to increase heat, but there's a lot more of it. And so as you go kind of down the chain, it's going to be methane, CH4, and then we got nitrous oxide, NO2. So there's going to be less and less of that in the atmosphere, but it does more damage, and it brings in more heat to the atmosphere. And so
And isn't it true that as because we're warming up and because there are places in the north that have been historically a sink for methane and other gases,
yeah.
that even though that they are becoming more prevalent in the atmosphere because the tundra is warming and other places are warming around the northern and southern parts of the world.
Yeah, I think it all kind of works into a balance, as in there are parts of the world that are changing, and that affects completely other parts of the world. It's important to understand that the atmosphere is supposed to be, homogenous, but things that we begin to do, things start to change around the entire gameplay, the whole game field of this Earth. So I think that's important to understand.
Now, I found it, you spoke a lot about the heat, not the carbon sinks that we have.
Yeah.
And I was impressed in reading about that part because a lot of people don't see the effect of our carbon sinks. Some being positive, of course, the trees, etc., that absorb carbon. But there's something interesting that happens with the second carbon sink, which is the vast oceans. Explain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's something called ocean stratification, I believe. And so essentially what the oceans are meant to do is that when carbon dioxide reaches the ocean will, generally absorb the carbon dioxide and pull it out of the atmosphere, kind of reducing the amount of total carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so that has been something that's been going on for many years, and this has been really good. But now we're having too much carbon dioxide, in the oceans. And so H2O, which is water, plus carbon dioxide, that leads to carbonic acid, which is acidic. And acid is never good, too much acid. And so if you have that, you're going to end up with, damaging kind of pH levels for these marine animals. And so that's going to cause, a lot of issues in the ocean, killing a lot of marine life, a lot of marine creatures, and damaging their entire habitat for centuries, So that is a huge issue with, carbon dioxide plus the water in the oceans. So, ocean acidification, it's huge.
It's huge, and as well, it goes ahead and it damages the coral reef, that pretty thing that many people like to be watching across Australia and these other parts of the world. They're getting damaged tremendously. Now, we talk about the ocean acidification. We talk about the many storms that we're starting to get, but it's something that's going to affect a lot of people, including the coastal areas. Sea level rise. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sea level rise. I mean, that is a huge issue that we're going to be facing, and so it all, of course, starts with global warming. We have too much heat in the atmosphere, and therefore we're losing a lot of those ice caps that have been sitting there since the Ice Age, in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So we're beginning to lose some of that, and it's beginning to transcend to higher global sea levels, and so from there. We begin to see a lot of coastal cities starting to take some of the damage, And I've even seen things in New Orleans where there's been centuries of like this nice, arable land farming that these families had, and now next thing you know, it's all underwater, and now they have to keep on going inland, and that's a huge issue. I think we're getting to experience for a lot of these coastal cities, and I think it's getting very serious, and we really. I live on California personally, and I think other people on the East Coast and all throughout the world, it really is troubling, and it's scary to think like we will be 20 years from now. That's kind of like a normal time for us to be adulthood. We're not supposed to be worrying about this kind of issue. It's too drastic to think about, but we will have to be worrying about it. Keep watching every single coast of ours slowly come in. We're losing the land we have. So I think that is.
The thing about it is the people who have, you're expressing a concern right now. You have your entire life ahead of you.
Right.
Those of us who are that could actually trigger sort of the irreversible portion of this climate change, we are the ones in control. So it's imperative on you, and you're doing a good job in what you're doing to try to make people aware. Now, you have a chapter called Politicization. And in that chapter, what I found intriguing is how you created the charts about the companies that support the Paris Agreement and et cetera, et cetera. So two things I'd like to hear from you. Explain to us why we should be in the Paris Agreement, and explain to me about the lobbying issue relative to the Paris Agreement and other issues with supporting the policies that will mitigate climate change.
Sure. So I think number one, first of all, we need to be in the Paris Climate Change Agreement. That is imperative to at least begin to start reducing these greenhouse gas emissions we're seeing. I mean, we're the number 2 emitter in the whole world behind China, and we're one of the very few who have not signed it, which is very troubling, and it's very scary to think that we are missing that. We need that. That's at least it's a good dialogue, or at least a good way to start reducing emissions, and then we need to start taking action further, like actual implementation. This is just a treaty, it's words, it's not actions just yet. We haven't seen complete action yet, but the fact that we're not even willing to at least oblige to a statement, that is completely crazy. There's nothing beyond that. And so beyond that, I think begin the lobbying kind of discussion in this country. I've actually read something recently. I think it was Ted Cruz, I believe, and someone else, Ocasio-Cortez. I think they're kind of working together to stop.
Imagine that. Two very opposite people.
Exactly. I mean, that's saying something really strong, right? And hopefully that can happen. We can kind of reduce the amount of lobbying we have in this country. It's not helping us, and especially climate lobbying. That's that cannot be debated through money. It's already been like that for hundreds of years, and we can't keep losing that battle because of money. And so I really wanted to explore a different element of climate change with that chapter. And I really wanted to look into how corporations and businesses are just funneling in the money and the profits they're using back into the government to say, okay, no, climate policy will not happen in my lifetime. So that's something I really wanted to push forward and explain how some of the companies with the most greenhouse gas emissions have the most lobbying, which is of course somewhat obvious. But I wanted to make sure that people can visually see the graph themselves and kind of really enforce the idea that we are the ones that are going to be experiencing this lobbying and all of these issues. So yeah.
Now, I don't know if you've heard that one of the Democratic presidential candidates, his name is Inslee. I think he's former governor of Washington. Was told that, or rather, when asked to have a debate on climate change, the DNC said there will be no single issue debate, meaning they won't give climate change the importance that it needs to have. But secondly, they made a threat that any Democratic candidate going to third-party debates on climate change will be excluded from the debates. I don't know if you've read that or not.
I actually missed that, but yeah.
What would you, assuming that what I'm saying is accurate, what would be your comment on that?
Right. That is just completely ridiculous, first of all. We need to have that dialogue. We need to have that conversation, at least, about climate change. If we're missing that, we're missing the entire point of and the entire essence of everything that we're going to be doing in the future. And so I know one of the candidates, I think Joe Biden, he has long time expressed his support for climate policy, and I think since the 1990s or even before that possibly. And so I think he is someone that's been a critical kind of person, kind of one of the leading figures and more experienced figures in this Democratic.
Now he came out against the Green New Deal. What would you say about that?
Right. I think personally, the Green New Deal is exactly what we need as the future. But living in America, realistically, in our political kind of atmosphere, it's not going to happen because we just don't have that enough. We don't have enough support.
Let me implore you on something. You're a young man, and my hope. I'm a political activist myself. Actually, an old man that's a full-time political activist. But what I would like, what I want, what I'm hoping to see, and why I was so impressed with your book at such a young age, is I want young people to not fall into the status quo.
That's
In other
right.
words, not ever say that, well, we know it's not going to happen. The mere fact that Arjun Marwaha wrote a book of this type, of this impact, tells me that there are young people out there who are willing and can break the status quo. So my imploring to you is to, in your activism and in moving and bringing more on board, to never use the word, well, you know how those old folks like me are.
Yeah.
But force the issue, because your book is a starting point in making sure that, well, if Biden doesn't support the Green New Deal, you either make sure, and if that's somebody that you want to support,
Exactly.
you make sure he supports it, or you make it be known that you are going to be ensuring that those who support it have a better chance of winning. And you have what to say to that?
I really like that. The ability so that I can use my voice with this book, plus I can kind of topple along many of my friends and all these people who have been supporting me, and using that as a way to like, okay, this is what we need to do in politics. This is the leader that we need to choose if he does this. I really like that approach, and I think that is the kind of way we're going to be using for the next year as we lead up to this huge election 2020. And so I think that is something we need to keep on working on. We've been working, I think you might have heard, 2018, of course, Greta Thunberg. She is really just
Yes, from Switzerland, I believe. Yeah,
from Sweden, yeah.
Sweden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she has really just kind of started this whole movement, and whole world leaders, millions of students around the world. I think it was 120 students on May 24th. And then before that, I was in the March 15th protest in LA. So I really got to see firsthand. I even got to speak there, which was wonderful, and kind of influence people, to really get them motivated. And we were all really charged force back there. It's what I remember. And the feeling of being unified with all these youth people, the youth, and to work hard to pursue a common goal, that there's nothing that will stop you. I'm kind of positive about that. Like, we need to make sure that we can get those people into the office. That's number one. And I think that's where 2020 will be different, because I think there's going to be a huge shift. This whole 2 years of buildup of climate change, into the conversation of the whole nation, I think there will be a huge shift there. And hopefully we can kind of secure a 2020 win for the, climate change, pro-climate change people.
Arjun, let me tell you, I want to talk, before, I want to tell you some more things from the political perspective. This is a political show.
Sure.
But I want to go over a few more things in your book, because like I said, this is not a huge book, people. This is a very good book that should be passed on, and that everybody should have a copy of, especially all folks that are considering call themselves progressives or conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I love this book is that it's easy to understand, and it's
Thank you.
what I call an apolitical book.
Yes.
In other words, this book knows no politics. This book knows no politics. This book just goes ahead and say, this is what we have to do if we're really intent on saving this planet. And it's not saying, oh, it's going to end tomorrow or anything like that, which I think is very important.
Thank you.
Now, let's finish off a little bit about the book. Extreme events. What can we expect?
All right, sure. So I think it's kind of clear that we've been seeing this past year these crazy kind of events happen. I mean, we had the polar vortex dipping 0 degrees, dipping 0 degrees Fahrenheit, let me specify, down into, as low as Colorado and all of these areas in the Great Plains. And that is something that we've probably never seen in a couple lifetimes. That is a very rare event, and that happens due to the normal polar vortex, of course, is supposed to be at the North Pole. And so what happens if there's too many winds, they can become shifted down to southward into lower Canada and into the United States even. So I think if we have more extreme events, we have more unpredictability in this whole kind of idea of a stable climate. And there's also the term climate breakdown, which I want to kind of pass by you. And that's kind of the idea that the whole kind of stability of the atmosphere and climate, it's all up for grabs at this point, and that we don't have any real stability that we used to have with this whole trend towards warming, and the gases will have a huger and huger impact as we move forward. And so I think that's one thing. And then number two, I was kind of looking into the hurricanes of last 2018 season, and we had some serious, Hurricane Harvey. We had these new kind of, I think Puerto Rico, I think that might have been last year or maybe two. And so I think these new occurrence of hurricanes, there's even a possibility of a Category 6 hurricane. We're on the horizon of a whole new strength of intensity of storms, and even the types of storms we're going to start experiencing. I mean, we had tornadoes rip across New York and throughout the entire stretch of the Great Plains, and the tornado alley shifting rightwards. That is something that we have never seen before. It's usually strictly confined to the Midwest, the Great Plains, and kind of known to be a danger zone. So I think it's just a whole new kind of take on how there are different intensity of storms. Category 6 hurricanes are a possibility, as I was going to say, with the Weather Channel even kind of demonstrating its kind of belief in that. And so it's also the floods that are going to begin to take over. Mozambique, it actually got hit hard a couple months ago because of the fact that there's just so much water in the atmosphere, and there's just such a strong, and even the warming oceans, that are breeding ground for these huge hurricanes to just completely destroy these tiny islands and these coasts. So there's a lot to be discussed about extreme events, and it's all simple that we kind of just turn down our emissions a little bit. We don't let too much heat to be kept in the atmosphere and cause all of these new issues that we've never had to deal with in our lives. So
now, and you also, of course, brought up that this increased heat means that we get more O3 in the atmosphere, meaning ozone from the increased heat. You talk about the stress on people now, the heat stress now on people, that because we're suddenly changing the envelope that we've been used to living in, waterborne diseases, etc. So just kind of touch a little bit on all of those for a short while, and then we'll kind of wrap up on this.
Awesome. So I wanted to kind of go within climate change. I wanted to first introduce greenhouse gases, and then touch a little bit about the corporation side, and then of course the obvious Earth effects. And then from there, I wanted to go in a different angle and kind of look at more personal, emotional connection to people. And so I found health effects on humans. That would be a good idea to kind of continue along the dialogue and really hit them home. So that would be the next thing I talk about, which is heat stress and all of these ideas. Of course, we have global warming and all of these issues. And so, there's something called hyperthermia, in which, there's too much heat and that kind of affects you. It's not a fever exactly. It's more like the outside temperature begins to kind of control your internal body temperature.
Right. And above the 94 degrees, 90, whatever the degrees is. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a huge issue that's kind of been, forecasted, and that kind of, first affect like labor productivity is something I kind of touched upon. And then that's right. And then furthermore, I think I touch on in heat stress a little more about all of this and how it will kind of affect the whole, world. And then I kind of move into more of the diseases and the waterborne disease. Yeah. So waterborne disease, vector-borne disease, I mean, more of that can be explored in my book. So it is all about the 50, 60, 70 years, we will be the ones that'll be there. And I think it's just important that we we continue to continue to push for action now so that we can save the consequences from later. So I think that is the key thing that we're missing here, is that we're just seeing there's just complete inaction in the government right now. And I think starting 2020, we need to from there build in and push forward, all of these new ideas that we've been having, in order to prevent all the consequences in the future. And so that is the kind of message I want to finish with. We need to do all the small things now in order to prevent a huge change, in the future. Let's all work together. Let's put these right people into the office, and let's push for people that we need, rather than people that just completely disregard the earth. Because you know what? The trees, the oceans, they do not have a vote. We do. So we have to represent them. Thank you.
Arjun Marwaha, 17-year-old activist and author of Changing Earth, Spreading the Climate Change Word for a 2020. Thank you so kindly for a wonderful interview. Thank you so kindly for writing that book. It was an important piece. You did a great job. All right, folks, that was Arjun. Let me tell you, first of all, I noticed a few people are mentioning that on Facebook we're getting some lag. I'm looking at our frame rate here, and the frame rate seems to be perfect. So try going to either Periscope or YouTube or even Twitch and see if the performance is better on there. I hate that on Facebook too. It's lagging, but we do a direct record as well, so we'll have the perfect version up a little bit later that you can go to YouTube and see it right away as edited, perfecto, all that good stuff. But stay with me now. Let me tell you, folks, let me give a little heads up, important heads up here. I want you to listen. Earlier on, when Mr. Smith gave, I don't remember his last name, but Mr. Smith gave Morehouse College, the graduating class of boys, he gave them free education, and everybody went crazy. Oh, billionaire gave all this money to the group. And I said, I am not impressed. And a whole lot of people attacked me. I can't believe it. If you don't have anything good to say, don't say it. Or they would say, well, look, he did a good thing. And I'm like, well, listen to me. He did a good thing mostly for himself. Because ultimately, what would happen thereafter is he would have increased his value by more than the $40 million that it has cost him to help those people. So if you dig a little deeper, you see that the concept of the billionaire being a philanthropic person isn't all that, right? Because the reality is you became a billionaire on the backs of others. We have yet to teach people or have people understand correctly that there is no benevolent billionaire. There is no magnanimous billionaire. Billionaire is a cutthroat business in a capitalist society that says, I will take as much as I can take. Listen to El Señor Anand Giridharadas here.
Earlier in the show, I talked about Michael Bloomberg's new commitment, investing $500 million in a plan to close all coal plants in this country and get a bunch of climate candidates elected. In the past, you and I have discussed philanthropy. You've been quite critical of it. What do you think about this money, this change?
So there's something that I like here relative to a lot of what you see, which is there's an attempt to work with government and make government work better, from just the bare bones that I understand. But here's a couple just reality checks on an initiative like this. So we got $500 million. So the fossil fuel industry spent nearly $2 billion lobbying against climate legislation between 2000 and 2016. Right? So first of all, there's just the issue of understanding what you're up against. $500 million may sound like a lot because it's more than most of us made this week. Maybe not more than Michael Bloomberg made this week. But it's not a lot relative to who's on the other side of this issue and how much money they will be spending in the same period to not
Mike
make these
Bloomberg
things
should
happen.
say, well, I'm not going to spend $2 billion, so I should spend nothing?
My argument is that there's some systemic issues here that may be a better investment of $500 million. $500 million spent trying to get money out of politics may actually get you more progress on this issue than just investing $500 million on this issue. $500 million actually invested in trying to have rich people pay higher taxes, so state and local governments have their own money to do this, actually may get you even more than $500 million. And frankly, Michael Bloomberg has made his money selling those computers that I can't believe anybody wants, but apparently everybody wants, to Wall Street. And the reality is his friends on Wall Street are the ones who push for a vision of the economy, an extreme profiteering economy that has caused the climate problem in the first place. And so Michael Bloomberg, in addition to this, I'm not saying instead of this, but if Michael Bloomberg could get the CEOs who I think revere him and rely on his product to actually think differently and to actually change a culture in which it is thought to be okay to make money by destroying the planet, that would actually probably have more
that's part
of
of
an
his
effect on the
Beyond
world.
Coal initiative, don't you think?
That's great. If he's willing to change how capitalism works so you're not allowed to make money by ruining the planet, I'm all in.
I'm pretty sure he wants to make it smarter or better, or that's what his goal is. We'll soon find out.
Well, he's advocated against higher taxes when those proposals came on recently. So I think in addition to being proud of his own philanthropic gifts that have his name on it, I think he needs to learn to advocate for some of these systems that actually elected members of Congress are proposing that would frankly equip government to solve these problems in a way that doesn't require noble billionaire saviors.
Mike Bloomberg, we just should say, was a proponent of closing carried interest, and he spoke against the corporate tax cut that President Trump put in place last year. Anand, thank you so much.
Also opposed the wealth tax and other things recently.
I love what Anand did. What Anand did is he did not allow her, and she's a nice person, but if I'm not mistaken, I think at one time in her life she probably worked for Mr. Bloomberg. Somebody can correct me if that's not true, but I somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I remember something to that effect. But anyhow, what he did is, Bloomberg comes out now and Bloomberg wants to support $500 billion to get rid of the coal companies. Well, you know what? The only deal with the coal companies right now is they're becoming a liability. Just like the tobacco industry had to come and clean up its mess, the coal industry may have to come and clean up its mess with the mercury that it's leaving in the ground and the groundwater and all of that. So, okay, remember, all the investment these billionaires did also found its way in all these polluting industries. All the investment these billionaires made also did it on the backs of these other folks who did other bad things. Let's not forget that. So when they come to promote their benevolence and, I want to do this great thing for society. I want to do this other great thing for society. Don't do stuff for society from what you are choosing. You let society decide what it is that they want to do. Pay your taxes. Pay your taxes so that we can support the things that need to be done. And don't think that it's a giveaway when you have to pay more taxes than anybody else, because you use more resources than anybody else. All of you that are manufacturing overseas in the Chinese factories, the Vietnamese factories, and all these other factories, our great big Navy is protecting those sea lanes for you so that the pirates are not taking over your stuff. Let's remember that. For all those people who think, these guys pay a lot. No, they don't. You do, America. All those pharmaceutical companies that are making millions. Who's making that? You are. You are the one who invested in the seed money for those drugs. That when they sell it off to the private companies, they sock it to you, and then you pay for it again. If we would only understand that there's no benevolency in the corporate structure. There's no benevolency in the billionaire. There's no benevolency in the executive class whose purpose is to maximize the profit and dividends of its owners, which you're not. Today and I'm going to get into the AMA in a minute about fighting the AMA. But today I was listening to this program on KPFT, with Arne Arneson. And it was interesting because there's this guy that comes on and he's talking about how can we make capitalism better. And the thing that he wants to talk about, the things that he wants to say, let's start talking about people having that more ESOPs, employee stock options, right? Okay, which means that the employees now becomes kind of like owners of the companies. And then he said, let's also talk about them sharing, the employees sharing more of the profits. And these are the changes that he wants to make capitalism better, right? And I'm sitting back here and I'm saying, wait a minute. Those are the things that we've been talking about. We've been talking about Marjugan in Spain, who it's a company that all the employees owned 60-something or 70-something thousand employees, if not more. those cooperatives that all these corporations, instead of having silent partners who you sock it to everybody, those silent partners want a 7% return every year. So in order to give them a 7% return every year, even though that is greater than the economy is growing at a whole, you say, oh my God, that means for pharmaceutical companies, we have to keep raising the prices of drugs more so than inflation, raising the prices of drugs, that these people who are going to buy these drugs are the ones who actually funded its creation. So here we have a guy who professes to be a capitalist that is now talking about cooperative, employee stock options, and profit sharing. Wow, that's what we're talking about. And when we talk about it, you just say, you're socialist. Come on, friends. Come on, people. Let's understand what's going on here. They're talking about those things that are never to be effected. They're talking about it just to talk about it. Now that we progressives are talking about these issues now, so they want to say, let's expand stock options, let's expand profit sharing, let's have people have a share into the companies. Oh, you know why they're saying that? Because we are saying that. But we mean it. They don't. We mean it. We want you to own the stocks in the companies. Why not? It is your sweat and labor. And when they say, oh, but what about those people who invested? Oh, they invested. Sure, invest you wish. Invest and charge an interest rate. Take your interest rate and go home. But not to say, it's the same thing when I talked about specifically. I don't know if you guys remember when I spoke about you build a house, you guys, the workers, build a skyscraper. You get paid once. You get paid once. But the investor in that skyscraper, sitting on his butt, not taking the risk of falling off a beam, is paid over and over again. And none of that rent money, none of that is shared with you because you have no stock options, because you have no profit sharing, you have none of it. Folks, it's an evil system that uses you. Today on a program, a separate program, I was implored, be careful of using the word slave when it comes to employees, even though the outcomes, the mechanism is pretty much the same. So out of learning not to centralize on certain issues and on others, I will just start referring to it as indentured servitude, la esclavitud, in I don't know what that word is in Spanish. But that is how I will, in deference, that is how I will speak about it going forward. But what is so important, brothers and sisters, is that we understand what's going on. And Anand Giridharadas did it perfectly. Do not allow billionaire apologists to take reign. Do not allow billionaires to get favor by doing something that ultimately costs them little or nothing, or in fact makes them a profit in the long run. And then think that somehow philanthropy is going to be good for us all. Folks, it is not. It is not. So, I am looking at some of the Facebook feed here, and it does look like Facebook may be having some streaming problem. That is not us, of course, because I'm looking at our thing here, and we've only dropped 24 frames out of several 100,000 frames, so we're okay here. Now, here's the deal. I want to talk, I have to get into healthcare, but just before I get into, let's see, Lee Grant says, I heard a possible solution to global warming. Military strikes disable all Chinese and Indian coal-fired power generation facilities. I know you're kidding. If I didn't think you were kidding, I would blow a gasket. But Brother Grant, I know you're kidding, my friend. I know you're really, 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 really kidding. So, but anyhow, here's the other topic I really wanted to talk about. Why I told folks, do not leave, manténgase conmigo. And the article is titled, and it's on Common Dreams. And it looks like I closed that one, so let me open it again. The title of the article is The AMA Stops Us from Getting Health Care. We demand you step out of the way of Medicare for All, which is the health care we want and the health care we need. But before I get to that, you always forget this. I want to remind you folks, go to store.com politicsdoneright.com. Here is the new cup that we have with that nice insignia. Again, that is Politics Done Right. Store.politicsdoneright.com. Store.politicsdoneright.com and get the cup. You can also get nice T-shirts, both for women and men. We have them for men and we have them for women, so that you can be sporting. I do politics right. I do politics right. So politics is done right. And I also listen to Politics Done Right. But also, folks, I want to remind all you very great people out there that this is a political show that it needs your support. So please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. All the people that subscribe to our show get to read all our books online. As I see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom. If you really want to understand how the economy works, all the little intricacies that they don't tell you about, you don't learn in school because they want to keep you as confused as possible, you learn this and then you'll understand the reason that people like myself, progressives like myself, take the stances that we say. And it's not, oh, we're communists. We're not. We believe in free enterprise. And this book tells you this is the free enterprise that we believe in. The thing that says you take control of your life. Patreon.com/politicsdoneright. And we give all the perks, right? I mean, like tomorrow I'm interviewing the great Dr. Reverend Barber, Reverend Barber, who's having the Moral Mondays and all that kind of stuff that you see on TV all the time. Well, we'll be interviewing him mañana, and I'll have special outtakes for those of you who are subscribers to Politics Done Right on patreon.com/Politics Done Right. You'll have special features from El Señor, Dr. Barber, Dr. Reverend Barber. That's a great guy, and we have the interview with him tomorrow, and we'll play that. That interview will be played on Daily Coast, but as well you'll have your special outtakes from that interview at our site if you are a subscriber to Politics Done Right. That is patreon.com/Politics Done Right. patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Okay, let's get back to the show and stop trying to get you to subscribe. Although, folks, I need several more hundred subscribers, more like 1,000 subscribers, small dollar subscribers, so that we can get all the things that we need done. We're way behind, and I am depleting every resource that I have to ensure and continue to do this. So I ask you for your support kindly, humbly. Patreon.com, patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Okay, getting back to the show now. Here's the deal. Well, hell, that was a show too now. But anyhow, here is the deal with the AMA, and this is what they said now. The American Medical Association needs to wake up and smell the coffee, he says, because we smell something bad, and it's you. The way you keep Americans from getting health care is rotten to the core. AMA, you can't fool me and the millions like me who now know who you really are and what you actually stand for. Who signed this? This is by Bill Bianchi at the Common Dreams. We know who you are. We demand you step out of the way of Medicare for All, which is the health care we want and need. You think the nation's largest association of doctors, whose stated goal is the betterment of public health, would want patients to get care, but the AMA has opposed every major effort to expand health access since 1917. That includes the National Health Insurance proposed in 1945 by President Harry Truman, who you accused of following the Moscow Party line, and Medicare, which once again you denounced as socialized medicine in 1965. You did not want to keep hospitals segregated, and rather, you did want to keep hospitals segregated and refused to admit African American doctors to your association until 1968. What an association, baby. The Red Menace is long gone, but the AMA still fights tooth and nail to restrict access to health care. Most recently, the AMA joined private insurance, hospitals, and pharmaceutical makers to create listen, you've heard me talk about this a lot, the Partnership for America's Healthcare Future, a fraud. The new lobby has one explicit goal: to kill the growing momentum towards Medicare for All. And momentum we have. shows like Politics Done Right, we are intent on not allowing the partnership for the future of American healthcare to take hold and continue to lie to you and let you continue to vote against your interests. We are going to present the facts. They are lying to you, they're misleading you, and we cannot allow that. It is existential. It is life or death. Repeat after me, my brothers and sisters. This is life or death. Every single one of you that's listening to my voice should be out there promoting Medicare for all. It's better than anything the private sector can give you because it does not have the profit motive in there. If you have to skim money to pay a 7% return to your investors, if you have to skim money to pay $40 million and more to it's many executives, many CEOs, many CFOs, and all these guys, if you have to spend that money, that is your premium being given to somebody else to live a great life while you suffer, while you beg them to provide service. In the show yesterday, we had the story of the woman who had to fight for 2 months. 2 months while her husband's cancer continued to grow. 2 months. Private health care, a failure. The United States spends twice, going back to his article, the United States spends twice as much on healthcare as other industrialized nations, yet has at best mediocre healthcare outcomes. You'd think that would trouble the fine doctors of the AMA. You'd think that these doctors would have some pride. How can England, how can France, how can Canada, all of them have better outcomes than the richest country on the planet? But they don't care. It's about them. It's about their money. It's about pilfering you. Truth be told, many doctors can't stand our health system. Our system of private insurance forces doctors to become bill collectors. They waste time they could spend offering care to patients worrying if they'll get paid. They're forced to spend far too much time and resources chasing after pre-authorizations from insurance companies like patients. They don't know for sure if a treatment will be covered until a claim is submitted. How is that insurance clerks can overrule doctors? How can a clerk overrule a doctor, what a doctor says you need? That's because the business model of our current healthcare system is to discourage access to care and deny as many claims as possible to maximize profits. We're the only industrialized country whose health industry is organized around the principle of providing care based on ability to pay. That's wrong. That's why I'll be standing with People's Action, the Jane Addams Senior Caucus, and the Illinois Single Payer Coalition in protest when the AMA meets the Chicago this weekend. We demand that you and other members of the Partnership for America's Healthcare Future step out of the way of Medicare for All. We are going to win care for every American with or without you. We need to fight for the people's right to determine healthcare policy because right now we have nothing to say. We can complain about our own personal situations, but we can't complain about how the policy is set up. We're the only country that essentially allows healthcare providers to set national healthcare policy, and the only remedy is for the people to finally have a voice in how healthcare is offered. I woke up to our healthcare crisis when I approached retirement age. For most of my career, I was a corporate trainer for Shell, Sears, and other Fortune 500 companies and had insurance provided by my employer. Since I was not yet 65, this is Bill talking, I contacted an insurance broker who sent a doctor to my house to evaluate me. I was told this was nearly 20 years ago. It would cost at least $5,000 a year to get insurance, plus $3,000 in out-of-pocket expenses, and they would never cover the three age-related conditions that were most likely to kill me. Now I have Medicare, but because that's slowly being privatized, I still pay over $4,000 every year in out-of-pocket medical costs. And millions of Americans have no insurance or access to care at all. There's a couple I know whose daughter ended up in a pediatric ICU because they couldn't afford the asthma medicine and $700 visits to a pulmonologist their insurance refused to pay. Other children suffer brain damage or die during severe asthma attacks just because they can't afford readily available medications. These deaths are unnecessary and are blood on the hands of those who refuse care for the sake of profits. I repeat, these deaths are unnecessary and are blood on the hands of those who refuse care for the sake of profits. My own brother lost his insurance when his wife, who worked at a hospital, lost her employer-based coverage. Her hospital was bought out by Mercy Health, a large network of faith-based hospitals. Mercy then took over the facility, decided to cut costs by reducing coverage to their own employees without telling them. So when my sister-in-law got sick and sought care at her own hospital, she got a $54,000 bill. She was then told not to come back for care because she was destitute. Sadly, these are just two of the thousands of stories, and he's wrong. These are two of the millions of stories about how our healthcare system fails us. That's why we're standing up to the AMA, private insurance, and hospitals to say enough is enough. It's time to put patients first for once in this country and offer Medicare for all to every single American. Folks, don't be fooled. Do not allow folks to lie to you. Do not be fooled. We have the money to pay for it. We have the money to pay for it. The amount of money that goes into the pockets of people who do nothing for health care. The amount of money that is given away in for profits and dividends and stockholders and huge bonuses and executive salary. It is theft. It is a transfer of wealth. It's your money. And if you are not upset, or if you are one found defending this system, my question to you is, after being told, after being made to understand, after being informed how things really work in this country, what's in your head? After you understand what's going on, after you understand the arithmetic, how can you allow them to lie to you? How can you think private insurance means anything? When you hear a Democrat go out there and say, oh, well, we don't want to get rid of 180 million Americans love their policy. They only love what they know. And what they know they're scared to lose, because they know if they lose something, then there's nothing else. They're dead. But give them the option for reality-based health care. Give them the option for humane health care. Suddenly, the private insurance that they think they love, the private insurance they think they want, is nothing more but a dud. Is nothing more than the best they thought they could get. Let's be real. Let's be real. Let's not let them call Medicare for all some left-wing thing. It's not a left-wing thing. It's a human thing. Don't allow them to change the argument. Don't allow them to change the narrative. Don't allow them to change the discussion. It's on you. We have to stick together, and we have to force their hands. And for those participating in the Democratic primaries right now, any candidate not 100% supportive of Medicare for all, no dice, no cigar. The answer is no. They cannot represent you because they are representing the profits of somebody else to take your money from you and possibly kill you. Any Democrat not supporting Medicare for all is supporting your future death. And I'm not exaggerating on that, brothers and sisters. Any person, any Democrat, anybody not supporting Medicare for all, after understanding how it works. And by the way, I forgive the average American citizen that does not understand that fear works. That fear works with Medicare for all. I can understand that. The average American citizen, I can understand that. I really do. But the Democrats that are not supporting Medicare for all, they have decided that they are going to take a political calculation of taking money from the thieves they decide that they rather take money from the thugs, plural, than to support you, than to give you the option to live, than to ensure that you can accumulate wealth as well. I'm not kidding. It is evil. Try to understand what I'm saying, brothers and sisters. Understand what I'm saying. What they're talking about is evil. They're talking about your life. They're talking about killing you over time. And saying it that way may hurt. Saying that way, some people may think it's hyperbolic. It is not. It is not. Anybody who understands math, anybody who has not been indoctrinated by the other side will understand that those in the know exactly what they're doing. If you support a candidate not responding to Medicare for all, you're in fact supporting your own death sometime in the future when you get sick. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3.